Hi, everybody. I'm Candid Stanisci of CFL Talk. Welcome to the Spanglish World Network on Zingo TV, channel 250. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app at the respective app stores for iOS and Android devices. While you download, make sure you download the app so you can rate it and leave a comment. All apps are free for Zingo TV. It's is also available at Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and also on smart TVs 2016 forward. Now on CFL Talk, joining me is David Morassutti, and it's almost time to get a new computer.
Almost.
Almost time. It's pulsating, so it's not. It's very distracting. But anyway, I don't know whether it's the monitor or the computer itself, but it is what it is. How you doing, David?
I'm doing all right.
So what'd you have for dinner today?
I had it's very simple, some chicken breast with broccoli. I had a salad. My mother made rapini. I'm not a big rapini person.
Oh, I love rapini. I'll take your rapini.
Okay, next time
They
I'll
were
make sure she sets it aside for you.
they were on sale at Metro this week for like $1.49.
You didn't tell my. I think actually
Bunch.
that's where my mother got it from. I was gonna say you didn't tell my mother that. She'd be very disappointed with you, Frank.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, it's like they're up to $3.99 a bunch. So, you know, I think even higher. Well, food's all getting higher. It seems every week, every couple of weeks, everything's going up 20 cents, 30 cents, whatever. Yeah. So I had pizza. We picked up pizza and had pizza. The dogs love the pizza crust.
Spoiled. That's so.
Oh, they follow me all everywhere. Well, we only have one left for now, but but we're going to be picking one up soon. So we'll have our second dog. We'll have two dogs again, which is what we're accustomed to. Well, there's a story out there, David. You're raised with me. You know, we've talked about gambling. You're a firm believer that gambling has a place in sports, but there is there is a catch, and the catch isn't guaranteed. But unfortunately, you might get the odd player that runs afoul, and that happened in the NFL with an Atlanta receiver.
Yeah, Calvin Ridley. Anyone who follows the NFL knows that he took time away from the team. Pretty much a month or two into the season. Basically, when I was took time away from the team for personal reasons and wasn't there for the rest of the season. A pretty significant player. He's their number one wide receiver. Supposed to be the one that would replace Julio Jones, who the team cut. And the NFL just released today that he is not going to be able to play for this upcoming season because he gambled on games starting that week that he was away from the team. It's been known that he did place a wager on one of his team's games, but did not. But under the league rules, or the league found in their investigation that he did not have any inside information or gave out any inside information. So there's that part. He has. I feel like it would have been a very significant ban, more than the one season, which is still significant considering he makes over $11 million. But because they found that he didn't have any, information shared that would have made it even worse crime in this case or offense, it's only one season. I think it would have been more if he did share more information. And he said, I was looking at his Twitter account, and this is maybe a case where maybe you shouldn't have your Twitter open during these things, and maybe what you say, silence is key in situations like this. He said he only bet $1,500, which I don't know
When
about
you're
you.
making $11 million,
Yeah, if you're making
$1,500,
$11 million
it's all
dollars,
relative, right?
yeah. But for me, I see $1,500, and I'm just like, good for you, because there's no way I'm putting down.
I think more than the money, though, right? It has to do with the fact, did he gamble on games he participated in?
Or
It's my
had
understanding.
information about. Even if he wasn't participating, did he know that a certain player on his team wasn't playing, or a player on the other team that wasn't playing? Let's not forget players exchange.
Thought.
Players talk. Players are good friends with each other. So I think that's really the issue there, right? Is I mean, this is what's gotten people in trouble in other sports. I mean, we all know about the Pete Rose situation and where his career is now. I mean, this is somebody who bet a lot, and it was a bigger, I think a bigger story than this one, but it still brings up why leagues are against gambling in the first place. This isn't because the league doesn't want to make money or this stuff. It's because the integrity of the league can get compromised by as simple as a player deciding to place a wager or a
It
player be.
starts with players betting against themselves or their team. That's where the issue starts, and that's the biggest concern, right? Because that enters into the world of, fixing games, game fixing. That's a major concern. With Pete Rose, not to let him off the hook, he never bet against his teams. They never proved that he bet against his teams. He always bet for his teams. But still, when you're in the game of baseball, and you raise the very valid point that when you're in the game, you have connections and you have the possibility of getting insider information. You could talk to somebody on a team where public knowledge is not that a player has been hurt and or won't play. That information may be something that a person can get vis-a-vis the back door, and or a private door, or just basically information that can go between people who know each other and misuse that information.
Yeah. And not only that, I watched the Netflix documentary on the college players who were being paid to help bettors land their bets.
Mm.
Specifically, one, I think this was Temple University or Arizona State University, one of those. And like just listening to this and the how orchestrated and how precise this all was and how much money this person won and how much the players were getting, because we know NCAA players were not being paid at the time. Like it's very frightening to think of what players will do if they see a bigger paycheck from somewhere else, and just how easy it is to not I mean how easy it is, but some are just willing to throw that away just for something that like for Calvin Ridley, like was that $1,500 bet worth losing out on an $11 million salary? I don't think so.
Well, like he said, he only spent $1,500. It was just change, right? Loose change in his pocket. But he doesn't understand. For them to do it, for a player to do that, they must be under the misconception that they're not doing anything wrong. They're if he's not getting inside information, if he's doing it strictly the same way an ordinary person does it, just strictly on what they see, right? But the problem is football players, you said it, and then I'll repeat it. They have inside information. They also There's the problem, of perception. And when it comes to sports, athletes have to be extra careful because the perception is always the danger zone, right? Like, once you end up in the world, like he gets caught gambling. Now, okay, was he gambling against his team? Was he playing? All this information, we don't even know it all. So all we're talking about here is with the Canadian Football League, is there enough opportunity to gamble? And is there a policing in that regard, or education with the players on what they can or cannot do? If it's just a simple no, you can't, then they're looking for trouble if they do it. So if you're not allowed to gamble at all, is that a sacrifice a player makes being a CFL player? Do you think it should be a sacrifice? In other words, they shouldn't gamble. They shouldn't be able to gamble. They should understand they can't be a part of that world.
Yeah, I'm of the opinion that they shouldn't be allowed to gamble on games. They should, even if it's not their team. I just think that let's say they find out that X receiver is dealing with a foot injury and is going to be limited and not going to be able to produce in the way he can. You know, that that right there is inside information, and it's they this that could be a crime in some cases, right? You know,
Absolutely.
so I think they, if they want to bet on NFL games as a CFL player, go right ahead. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. Um, I think this is something where the CFL maybe needs to. There has to be a clear directive sent out to the players saying, "Look, we're not against if you want to gamble or do anything like that, but there will be a zero tolerance on CFL." Because then the league is trying to make is going to try to make itself one of the top sports that you can bet on, right? Football is a great sport to bet on because of all the different odds that you can do. They don't want to be any sort of risk of people saying that can I trust the integrity of the sport? You don't want that in the integrity of the sport to come into question because of gambling. Hence
Absolutely.
why a lot of leagues have been very hesitant about gambling in the first place. How many safeguards? This is something that governments. I was listening to a lot of the Senate talks about making gambling legal in Canada, and the biggest argument was always about fixing not just and people think, oh well, the addictions and all those things. That's you can't control that as much. There are limits you can do, but it's always about the way that it can impact competition and the way that it can impact people taking advantage of the system. And I think that's the biggest issue with gambling is how do you make sure that it's fair and that everyone's following the same rules.
In the CFL, basically, they have a sponsor. That sponsor, they have a website where you can gamble. You can, all the different ways you can gamble. They don't say anything about allowing players to gamble, but they do make it, very possible for the fans to gamble. And this is something we heard about at the Grey Cup, um, and it's something they're hoping is in the beginning of maybe a good relationship. So the motivation here is the CFL are allowing themselves to be um, used by a sponsor, and as far as gambling is concerned, and they're working with them to make sure that there's profits, and they're doing that because they have a split of the profits, which I think the CFL gets more than the gambling house, right? So it's a partnership. So now in that partnership, there's going to be, and there has to be actually an understanding of where that money goes, right? How much it is, because it's not just about gambling, it's about where the money goes. That money that does it get shared with the players? Does it go straight to the CFL? So gambling, players gambling is only one facet of it. Getting caught gambling is only one issue. This thing's There are a lot of issues here with gambling, right? And there has to be for the sake of the gamblers, there has to be a lot of information handed out freely. In fact, one of the issues that came up this year was the CFL should let people know who's vaccinated and who isn't. And not because we want to know their business, but because that could create an issue for that player to play. And if there's a reason why a player can't play and it's known by some, it needs to be known by all, which ultimately I think is what levels the playing field in gambling.
Yeah, and for the long, we're starting to see now even an interesting conversation, an interesting topic Elliot Friedman had brought up was Austin Matthews doing commercials for a betting company. Current active players were usually not allowed to do that because you're being sponsored by a betting company. The connection between gambling and players that are currently playing, you don't necessarily see that. And you're seeing that more so with retired players being asked to do this because they have no well, unless they're involved with the team, in a front office role,
Hmm.
or you know, if they're not actively involved in the
They're
sport.
independent. If they're independent.
Yeah, like, Matt Sundin does the poker one,
Yep.
and all those things, like, um, it's such a, their leagues want to take away any chance of being liable in a situation, or having that being a potential problem, right? You try to get rid of the problem by not having it in the first place. And I think,
Absolutely.
yeah, so that's, I think, the very important factor in all this is, you know, if the CFL wants to broaden their, the scope of gambling and how it can help generate revenues for the league, it's got to make the players a partner in this, because it's really the partners that can make this all kind of go a little bit sideways, and that, you know if they're not, I look, I have a lot of faith in that players will not want to risk their potential future, their playing careers, and their means of providing for their families, because they want to place a wager that, you know on something that's never a guarantee or a slam dunk. That's not like that. Like, football's a team sport. It's
And you have to put it in perspective too, David. The amount that they make gambling in the CFLs relative to the amount of money that the CFL generates, right? You know what I'm saying, right? So while, a player may not earn as much in the Canadian Football League, while gambling, they probably wouldn't make as much either. So it's relatively, it's relative, right? So, is it worth for the amount that you can gamble in the Canadian Football League and be a player? I would think not. I just don't think there's, you're not going to get a $50,000 payday on a CFL game, or you're not. I don't think they have, the gambling's not that high. I think with the CFL, they're going to generate some money, but it's basically this whole premise is it's a flyer, right? It's
yeah,
it's we don't know that the CFL, this will be successful with the CFL. What we do know is that there's a popularity in gambling, and if you're paying $2 for a ticket and you can win $10, that's going to be interesting for some people, right? Because it's the same thing as people who buy tickets to the Canadian Football League. They spend $30 for a ticket, while you go to a Leaf game, you spend 400. So it's all relative. The important thing is, with gambling, is not whether the players gamble or not, because we don't expect them to, but how much does that add to the entertainment value of the game?
yeah, and I think, anybody who does gamble will learn that player props, which is, you can bet on a player to reach a certain stat in a game, whether it's, how many receiving yards, how many catches, how many rushing yards, things like that. They do put a limit. The gambling sites are, let's not forget, gambling sites are not stupid. They know when they're getting conned. So to avoid that, they put a limit on how much. And a friend of mine who works for a betting company told me this. There's limits that they put on things like that, because what if a player wants to throw $1,000 on them to get 3 catches or more in a game? And look, betting
The
companies.
same way you're not allowed to card count,
Yeah,
right? Anything that increases your odds against the house, nope.
like the there's people might think that, oh, then you're gonna get players make get betting companies get smart, you know
They're in the business of making money.
look, and if and
They're the house.
I point back to that Netflix documentary, because this person that was making bets on these games, he didn't do it at one casino, because remember, back in the day when you were making a bet in Las Vegas on sports, you had to go to a casino to do it. You couldn't
Mhm.
just do it on your phone. You could, sometimes they call a
Different
bookie.
ball game now.
Yeah, but like, they actually went to multiple locations to place these bets,
Wow.
because if you put all the money in one spot, it's going to raise red flags. So I think people also need to understand that, gambling sites put up safeguards. They put up ways to protect themselves in cases like this where players may try to cheat the system. I'm not saying that all of them do, but we know that some will try because I mean it's if the money's there to be made, they're going to try to take advantage.
Okay. So good luck to the Canadian Football League in gambling. I wanted to touch on women in football.
Okay.
We we talked a little bit, not enough, I don't think, about the CFL and the fact that we have a Canadian Football League team. Um, the BC Lions have hired an assistant coach for their defense, and her name's Tanya Walter. Rick Campbell sat with her, and they had a nice conversation. And the idea here is that we're starting to see a lot of women, involved in the Canadian Football League, and not just coaches, but also management. Uh, 31 women work in high-profile jobs in the NFL. 31 new women have been hired, and there's dozens of them working within football. We've seen it in hockey. Um, when we look at football, there's a lot of talk, David, about people of color getting positions. How do you feel the progress? And we have to remember that the progress in football for women is pretty much even across the board, whether it be the NFL or CFL. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Whereas in the football world for visible minorities, the NFL is sadly lacking. The CFL, on the other hand, is way ahead of them on that score. It's been forever, just like it's been forever that there have been black quarterbacks, you know, um, and even visible minorities. We have, one of the greatest quarterbacks in Montreal Alouette history, right? So we have that, and now the women are getting involved, and it's amazing that we don't realize as much as we do in hockey, how we realize in football how a lot of women actually play football. They get even less attention than those in hockey. And we all know that to be a coach, not that you have to be a player, but it is an advantage. It is a way to immerse yourself in the game, right?
Yeah. I think I mean just remembering our conversations with Amanda during Grey Cup week.
She'll be on in the next couple of weeks. So when you were asking about having guests on, she'll
Yeah.
she'll be on in the next couple of weeks. I'd like to talk to her about it. Sorry, didn't mean to
Yeah,
interrupt you,
no,
but
and you know
I
what? Like I think right now is you know, I think yeah, it's a good thing with the CFL that they don't have to have a Rooney rule like they do in the
yeah,
NFL to tell teams, can you make sure you at least interview, people because we live in a totally different viewpoints of what the CFL and NFL and how owners view things and how teams are run. But I think right now is what's the incentive for a CFL team to hire a woman in their front office because and this is not because women aren't qualified, but it's also teams have to be so picky on who they hire because they don't have the budget to just hire whoever they want.
but
Another
it,
reason
but at
why
the end, but the end of the day, David, you're right. But they also all women need is an opportunity to get experience, right? So it's not even about money, but we learned we 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 learned from Amanda. We learned from her. It's not enough just to coach. She's very active in suggesting that they should get jobs, not just hang around and look like you're working for the team when you're not really working for the team because you're not an employee. So yeah, sorry.
no, no,
All,
but I think you're
all I
totally
wanted
right.
to get in is the fact that it's not about being interviewed. I think being, if nothing else, that Amanda taught me in her conversation. Amanda Ruler is who I'm speaking about. She is the running backs coach at McMaster. Um, what she taught me, or cranked my brain a little bit, it's about how many have you hired. You know, uh, uh, I get it, and you're right. They should be at least interviewed. But for me, if they interview them, is that it? That's all they have to do, or
I hate that too.
right? So there has to be some sort of proof that there's progress, and progress means that if there were no women coaching in the Canadian Football League last year, and now there's one this year. While that seems like a very insignificant number, it's very relevant considering there are only 9 teams, right? So progress can be much better than it might seem, but it must be progress. So next year, they hire a coach that's just a consultant. So the reality is, and what I believe, and what we need to see when it comes to people of visible minorities as well, is we need to see how different is it this year compared to next and last year. How different is it in the past few years? And there should be progress, discernible, factual data that shows there's progress, not that we're thinking about it, because I think we're all past that, right?
hmm I think even on top of that, I look to what the NBA has done. The NBA has actual programs, like positions that women can apply for, and you will get almost mentorship, but you're also being paid for it. Why isn't the CFL have a program or tell teams create a position? It doesn't count towards your team's cap,
Right.
your management cap, and this is allowing women that opportunity, and there's no barriers for them. I don't see what's the downside. I understand maybe someone will feel like that. Then this is the CFL, thinking that this is the only way that they can do it. But the only way you can get CFL teams to reimagine their thinking on this is if you give them a chance to try it too, right? Break down that
Absolutely.
wall somehow. And I think that's the best way to do it. Give them incentive to do it by doing something that other leagues have done and it's been successful. I think we're very close to having an NBA head coach that's a woman.
Oh,
I really do
absolutely.
think
There's
so.
already officials. There's assistant coaches too.
Yep.
That they're in, and again, not that this is a hard and fast rule, but the fact is that the WNBA
Mhm.
is further ahead than women's professional hockey, right?
Yep.
Women's hockey is struggling. In fact, the Toronto Six were just sold, and ironically, Angela James is rumored is to be one of the owners of that team.
She is actually, yeah.
Right, so she's a member of the visible minority. She's also a female hockey player. I had the privilege of calling her games decades ago. So there's a bit, as long as there are leagues, it's all about giving women a chance. And this is key, I think, David. And you made the point beautifully. And as far as the NBA offering opportunities, there has to be an immersion by people. If you want them to be successful and you want to include them, if you want to make people inclusive, they have to be a part of the grassroots and working their way up. You can't, it helps if hockey's in better shape. The idea of having women coaches is in better shape. If the WNBA is successful and women's college basketball is successful, there's going to be that opportunity a lot, right? For
Yeah.
women to get better. Because quite frankly, honestly, the expectation of having a female coach of a female team, that's almost to the point where it's inexcusable that there not be one, that there should be one. Not that there can't be men, but I think you understand my point. And there should be this opportunity to develop, right? And it
Yes.
it means real, like you said, real education real immersion in what they're looking for, having an opportunity. So yeah, it's not just about getting interviewed. Not that I'm against the idea of interviewing people, but it shouldn't be enough. Being interviewed isn't enough, I don't think.
No, I don't either, because we're seeing it in the NFL interviewing, candidates for head coaching positions who are black isn't leading to more black hires.
Right.
It's
You have
not.
one NFL coach. You had one NFL coach. Now you have two, I think, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
Lovie Smith being
right.
hired in
So
Houston.
you had one NFL head coach,
Right,
right?
and the other team that, Brian Flores, who was the other black head coach who was fired, was hired by the Pittsburgh Steelers as an assistant, and their head coach is black.
Is
Like,
the only
was the only team for the longest. Like, and are the Pittsburgh Steelers a worse off team because of it? I don't think so. There's no tangible proof that.
I don't know. I don't know where, you know, I don't know where people could possibly get the idea. Um, I don't know what the difference is. I'm struggling to try and figure out how to even ask that question of why can't uh, an African American coach an NFL team? Why is it only one? And now this year too. Why can't they find any others? Is it the old boy network? And it within that old boy network, right? Uh, it's not so much about racism, it's about opportunity, I think. And that's really, I think, the key. And I go back to what you said before, and I want to keep saying that. You have to almost ensure that people have a pathway to the job. And you're right, what the NBA does is excellent. And the CFL is doing that too. They've just instituted their own, and we should maybe see if we can get somebody from the Canadian Football League or from the that are helping to teach and consult in helping in players, which is what they're doing, making the transition from being a former player. They're working with the CFLPA to get them involved in the management side of the Canadian Football League. It's not just about being interviewed. It's about being put on a track to prove that you belong. And the way that that happens is not just a 2-hour interview or a 10-hour interview or a 20-hour interview. It's about learning, given an opportunity on the inside to really understand what goes on and what helps to make somebody a head coach.
Yeah.
All that stuff, right? It's the real knowledge that has to be shared. And in a way, that's the old boy network that sometimes people refer to because, you know, people need an opportunity to really be given a chance to learn, right?
Yeah, no, and we had one of those coaches in the CFL on our show, Devon
Absolutely.
Claybrooks.
That's right.
You know, at one point there were three. There was Devon Claybrooks, there was Orlando Steinauer, and Corey Chamberlain in Toronto. Three out of your 9 teams. That's 33%. It's a lot better than the NFL, who have who had a 1.2 of the third. Like two out of their
Yeah.
entire league.
Yeah,
So,
it's
and I think I will give the NFL credit on one thing though. NFL teams that have women in, not just
that was my point, though. They're doing better with women than they
yeah,
are with visible
like,
minorities.
and you know what, I love when they spotlight it, because it shows, and some say, oh, it's a PR stunt, or oh, it's trying to pander to the the crowd that are calling them out constantly. Well, no, it's also to, how do people know about it if you don't show it and you don't let them actually know about it, right?
Uh,
You have to show it to you
You're
have
you're
to let.
100% right because look, we've seen now in some cases, especially hockey's done this, where they've brought women hockey players in to see how fast they can skate and how accurately they can shoot. And both times they were highly competitive against the men. So what that does is it gives an opportunity for other women to visualize their ability to play the game really well, where it enhances the reputation of women's hockey, right? So even though you might think it was just a promotion thing, there's a point I'm trying to make. They brought them in. Let's face it. They brought them in. Well, let's give women a chance. Well, once you do that, that's the whole point here. Interviews aren't good enough. Giving a person, a human being, an opportunity to show what they can do and remove any doubt whether they can or cannot handle what they're being asked to do. It's called an opportunity. And within every opportunity, there's always people that change people's mind. Baseball didn't have a black baseball player for a long time, not because they weren't good enough, but because they weren't given an opportunity. And once that happened, once a player was given an opportunity, they all wear their number, the numbered 42. Once they gave a player an opportunity, he didn't work his way up from being the 300th best player. Immediately, people realized that a black baseball player not only can be competitive, but could be one of the best. And
Yeah.
that's because of the opportunity, not the interview, but the opportunity.
Yeah, I know exactly. It's not, uh, it's really hard sometimes also to hear how people speak of it.
Ugh.
It's That's the part that really bothers me. It's almost like, especially those who aren't in, like, I know fans have their opinions, but unless you've actually have experienced it and seen what these women can provide, you can't. I'm sorry, you can't talk on it. You can't think of it as, I give credit. These women are very resilient people. They always, I know what they'll say. They always have a chip on their shoulder. Damn right, they always have a chip on their shoulder because there's always people that are trying to push them down.
Well, because people again, it's the difference between being interviewed and being given an opportunity.
Mhm.
During the interview, you have to prove that you can do something. That how do you prove it if you've never done it, right? Or you've never been given a chance. It's on the job training. Why do they have on the job training? Why does that exist? That's existed forever. Why do they have on the job training? Well, maybe it doesn't pay as much as somebody who actually does that job. But what it does is it gives somebody an opportunity to say, I can do that. And then not just talk about it, but show that they can do that. And that's what women are doing in hockey. That's what women are doing in football. That's what women are doing in basketball. They're doing it in all the sports because, admittedly, and we can't hide from the fact that that some of them are being given an opportunity because organizations, whether it be the NFL, NBA, NHL, because they have no choice but to give them a chance, right? Because
Mhm.
because the political will to give women an opportunity is so strong, and it should be, right? That it's stronger, right, than the people within that group and their ability to decide, well, who can we hire, right? So there has to be this sort of, I'm sorry, women have to appear like they're being forced on. And this is the same thing with visible minorities. If you just leave it to trusting someone to have an opportunity because they had a conversation, it's never going to work. There has to be on the job training. And you said it with the NBA and the courses that they have there. I explained with the CFL with what they're doing. It has to be real opportunity, because if someone has to prove that they can, if I have to prove that I can do drywall without being given a chance to be on a job site, start hanging drywall,
Yeah.
how do I get that job? In life we all have that challenge, right? The whole idea is you go to university, you yourself, you go to school and learn your chosen trade as a writer. But until somebody says, write for me, how can you prove that the first thing they say to you is, what experience do you have? It's not necessarily racism or sexism that's in the way. It's that opportunity. It's always, to me, it's always the opportunity. You can know your business inside out, but without the chance to prove you can do it. And I know a lot of people who went to school and they they have to somehow get somebody to convince them to give them a job, because until they get the job, they can't prove they can do it.
Yeah. No, yeah, and I think, I mean, Frankie, and you have the experience in that field of construction and knowing that you
Absolutely.
don't just tell an electrician, all right, here's a job, go do it, when they haven't had any experience of doing it. How many hours does an electrician need to put in?
Absolutely. And there that's a good example, and you might know this, I believe you probably do. And here's the thing, folks, if we wanna make that relationship and with football the same thing, you become an electrician and you learn the basics in school of electrical, and then you work for a company, you do the basics. As you are an electrician, while you're in there, you spend time going back to school to increase the level of understanding and the level of licensing that you have. In other words, tests that you passed, letters behind your name, or letters on a piece of paper that says you can do this, right? That's the same thing with coaching. It's the same thing with women in coaching. They have to start somewhere, and it's important that we find a place for them to start. Your point of bringing somebody in and not counting them against the cap is an excellent example of how it can be done in the Canadian Football League. And is it a large sacrifice? I don't think women who want to be coaches in the Canadian Football League who haven't done it yet are looking for $150,000 salary to start. All they want is a real we again, Amanda Ruler, what she wants is a real chance. In other words, put me in the position where I live and die according to my knowledge and ability.
Yeah, yeah, I really think that, teams think that they're I just think that in the current climate, teams have been comfortable with what they think works,
Mhm.
and more I think that there needs that this is why people always say you need new fresh blood in front offices instead of recycling the same people, because you bring in the same general manager who's been for three other teams, guess what? He's going to bring the same people he's had from other teams. Like, it's really hard for people, even young people sometimes, to gain the trust of, especially in the sports world, of someone, because they have an opinion of how it this is how we've done it and this is what's worked for us. Well,
Again, an opportunity.
exactly. And I think I also think this is maybe, the CFLPA could do a little bit more on their end too, to maybe encourage teams as well to.
I think they're doing that. I think
Yeah.
they're working on that. And again, and I hate to bring this up, but there's always costs attached to doing something like that. And this is a tough time for the Canadian Football League, the CFLPA as well, because they're trying to recover financially to get not only players paid what they're worth, which we know they don't get paid what they're worth. And when I say that, you know what I mean. I hope folks you understand what I'm saying. It's hard to improve the salary structure of the players when we've been away for a couple of years and there hasn't been money coming in. So it's a tough road for the Canadian Football League, their teams, the cap with as far as management's concerned, players, how much they earn. Everybody wants and hopes to make more money, but there has to be the money to make it. And so what does that mean to me? Because I want to shine a positive light on this. This is an opportunity to make small investments in what might be big returns, right?
Hmm.
With
Yeah.
women, players, former players getting involved with teams as employees within the management structure. Small investment right now. It's all they can make, but any tiny investment that basically puts somebody in a position to have an opportunity to prove they belong. Trust me, people are awesome. They prove they belong, especially if it's what they want to do.
Um, I was even gonna say, I mean, the CFLPA kind of has their own issues right now where they don't have a CBA, and if I mean, look, I have a lot more faith that the CFL and the CFLPA can get together on a deal. I mean, depending on if CFL players decide to dig in on things that maybe they have, passed on from past seasons. Because if you're watching the baseball lockout right now, you're seeing
Oh
a
my
group of
goodness.
players who have told and MLB owners, you know what, we were okay with certain things in the past. We're not anymore. Like they're digging in this time. I mean, let's also not forget that the MLB owners locked out the players, and I don't think the
Yeah.
CFL. I mean, the CFL will have to consider something like that just because there's liable risks of contracts and injuries and all those things. I'm
And the
very
players
curious.
are also interested not just in salary and competition, improving the competition. In other words, spreading the opportunity for teams to win
Hey,
because players
a
love
10th team
championships,
opens
right?
up a lot of jobs for players. That more players, more money. And I think also, revenue and being partners. How many times have we heard the CFL, start a new initiative and the players are like, we had no idea about it. We weren't partners
Yeah,
in
uh,
this.
we've heard that. We've heard that. I'm not really sure how much whether there's a bit of spin on that or not because I'm not in the room to, you know, I just think when it comes to stuff like that, definitely the owners and the players need to be more, you know, more m more of pulling for each other and profit together, but, like I said, right now, this year is gonna be tough because, just because the players are back playing and the owners are selling tickets doesn't mean everything's back to normal and or the coffers are at where they would have been if there was no pandemic.
Yeah, and I'm really and this is why I think the I don't mind when the CFL and CFLPA kind of have to go back to the table each year because especially in these times, this would be the worst bargaining position for the players to be in,
Mm.
considering what the pandemic has done for the league. But I also think if I'm the players right now, I'm very curious to see what's the CFL going to do to not make the pandemic their excuse going forward. In terms of what's the CFL going to do? How can we help the CFL thrive? What's the CFL planning to do to push things forward?
That's a $1,000,000 question. And we haven't heard much. We haven't heard much. And I think it's because there's really not much to talk about. And I truly believe the league right now is trying as hard as it can is to create an environment where the season comes in the way we expect it to, the way we want it to, the way it did before. And I think a lot of what they're doing is ensuring that the pathway to a regular season, right? And a regular playoff season and a regular Grey Cup, right? That they have the avenue and the guardrails up to ensure that happens. And I think that's their priority. And for you and I and probably the fans is we want to know how they're going to sell the game. We want to know how they're going to make the games the season more attractive. What are they doing to bring in new fans? What are they doing to not only be prepared for the people who've been waiting for the CFL to come back 100%, right? Because we
Mhm.
haven't seen that. To see it come back 100% and ensure that 100% of the people that were here before are confident in being able to make the not just financial investment, but the emotional investment. There's a lot of disappointment in fans. Like we see it we saw it, if I can talk about the other football and TFC, for example, they talked about a full house. That wasn't a full house. They had the opportunity to fill the house. Did they sell all the tickets? Maybe, but it wasn't full, right? So, and it is a BMO does TFC does fill BMO. They've done it before and they'll probably do it again. But there's a lot of people who are hesitant about going in, all in with their teams. Even when it comes to the Leafs, when it comes to all these
The
teams,
Raptors.
everybody, right? There's some hesitation because, quite honestly, in some cases, some teams have raised the prices of their tickets for what? For not playing the last couple of years? So people are making these decisions. There's financial encumbrances that are reality in the world, right? So the CFL's in tough. They need to catch some breaks, and they deserve it. The game, if given an opportunity, the most important thing is the way the game is played, the game experience at the stadium, and the fact that the players are as ready as they can be, both on defense and offense, and of course, special teams, that the players are ready to play and they can be the best they could be, right? So it's not easy because it's not like it's a continuation from last year. Now, in this year with all the changes and the players changing teams, it seems more than we're accustomed to. That's just another layer of how do we work through that?
Yeah. I also think with the case with TFC, maybe we'll wait until the warmer weather comes. Like, I don't know how
Yep.
many people will want to go to soccer game in March in Canada, because I mean, for the Canadian team, they will. Um, I also, as an Italian, will like to see what happens when the big, when Lorenzo Insigne comes, how much of a bump that gives to attendance, because there's a buzz with things like that, and there is always in mind of how it will market the team and impact tickets.
Yeah, and then the Genoa player that was gonna come, but now because Genoa is in danger of being relegated, he's decided to stay in Italy.
Yeah, I heard that he was, initially he was going to come even if they were going to get relegated. I think he might still come. It was supposed to be done like two
Well, it
weeks ago.
doesn't help the fans, that kind of game. Again, it's the same thing we've talked about when it comes to the Argos, right? You wanna bring people to the stadium? Make the game a good one. Give the fans some entertainment, and entertainment is not losing 4-1.
And I also think make fans also aware of what's going on with the team, right? They come to the stadium and at least give them a chance that they can name 5 to 10 players on the field or on the team. Because you
And
go there and and look, I don't expect them to know who the third string quarterback of the Toronto Argonauts is, but know who the starting quarterback of the Toronto Argonauts. Like, that's
the
the other thing I think that needs to be kind of realized there is you need to build up the excitement not just of the product on the field, but those who are involved in the product on the field. Because that's what
absolutely.
sells sports as well.
Yeah, there's gotta be more hype. They gotta figure out what that hype should look like and what will make, the fans interested in coming. I totally believe that they've got an opportunity here with the players that they're bringing in. Brandon Banks is a great opportunity to make a pitch. Needless to
Mhm.
say, Andrew Harris is another one, right? You
Yeah.
know, they've had lots of receivers that have been high profile. They've had players that are high profile, but when it comes to the type of player that a Brandon Banks is and an Andrew Harris, they haven't had they haven't had the best players in the league
Yeah, like
as often.
superstar
Yeah.
players. Like Ricky Ray was a star player, but he didn't. He wasn't, the marketing type of superstar. He was good. He's a Hall of Famer. He's one of the best quarterbacks, but he wasn't that player that really sells the game on the field. Just because that's not how he just wanted to play the game and win.
A lot
And
of the players that they brought in were players who were ready in the minds of everyone, ready to be that player, and they weren't.
yeah,
We've had some receivers come in here that came in with that tag, right? That they could be the best in the league, and it didn't quite work out that way.
no, I agree.
right? And like, for example, the Wilder thing, where Wilder came in here and he blew the doors off the league his first year, but and it just didn't happen for him the following few years. So that you need stars to sell the game in every sport. You got to have stars, and those stars have to be relatable to the fans. CFL fans love buying their jerseys, love wearing the nameplate on the back, the number of a player. You know, uh, 12 years ago, I bought a Ricky Ray jersey, because he was a star. It wasn't hard to pick him as a jersey to own, or like I have pinball too. Um, you know, those are the kinds of things that don't just develop; they have to be fostered, right?
Mm-hmm. No, for sure. You have to work on it somehow.
Yeah. Well, well, listen, it was fun getting together again, talking about the Canadian Football League.
Always fun. Always.
Thanks. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Okay, for David Morassutti, I'm Candid Frank Stanisci. Thank you for watching CFL Talk, airing live Mondays at 9 p.m. This show can also be heard on the Spanglish World Radio Network. For CFL Talk news, entertainment, and other sports programming we offer, please check out spanglishworld.ca. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. Thanks for watching, everybody.